How can the SAT better gauge students' intelligence and potential? At some point in everyone's lives, there's been a time to sit down and take a test. Some tests are more important than others, such as the SAT. It's been argued that the SAT doesn't accurately assess student abilities. So, how can the SAT be further improved upon to become a better form of gauging students' intelligence? With COVID, many of the tests were canceled, and many colleges have temporarily dropped the requirement for an SAT score to be submitted. The fact that so many colleges dropped the need for a score so quickly begins to make people wonder if the scores were ever really that important to begin with. The College Board states that the SAT is intended to measure literacy, numeracy, and writing skills that are needed for academic success in college. Recently, many colleges and universities have gotten rid of SAT scores for admission. So, do we actually need them? More than 2/3 of four-year colleges and universities in the US will not require applicants to submit an ACT or SAT score. This major lean towards going test optional is a good reflection of both the desperation of the current situation and the ease at which many of these colleges were just able to drop the test score requirements. The SAT gives a major unfair advantage to wealthier students. The average SAT scores increase with every $20,000 in additional family income. Schools with more money available will sometimes run elective classes specifically for test prep to coach the students on how to take the SAT and how to do well. Without tutors or preparatory classes, the lower income families struggle to support the child's education. Continuing to have the SAT as a required test for all students to get into college may have more of an economic motivation than people realize. The SAT itself supports the businesses of so many private tutors across the country. As of 2015, parents have spent $13.1 billion on test prep. That includes preparation, tutoring, and even counseling. To put into perspective how much money that is, with the price of skyscrapers being about $20 million, that could pay for approximately 650 skyscrapers. A possible solution to probably the biggest problem with the SAT could just be to put more funding towards poorer areas in order to create more help for those students. Students from families earning more than $200,000 a year average a combined score of 1714, while students from families earning under $20,000 a year average a combined score of 1326. If the government were to step in and have more funding being put towards the schools in poor areas of the United States, these scores could go up without even needing to change the SAT itself or any requirements surrounding the submission of scores. One of the most important aspects of the college application is the essay. An SAT score doesn't show the depth of a person. It only gives a short preview of what some of the students' math and English skills are. Without the SAT on a college application, the academic skills are proven from the GPA and resume section, or possibly the writing supplements. The SAT could possibly make an application look worse if the other categories are up to standards. With giving the student the option to not include their SAT score, that would be giving them the chance to decide whether or not they personally believe it improves their application or if it makes it worse. Stress is a major part of every teenager's life. I don't need a statistic to prove that to you. A place where a lot of stress stems from would be standardized tests, and that everyone's required to take. If the SAT was no longer a requirement for students to take, then they would have way more time to focus on their regular schoolwork and could boost their GPAs. Generally, students put in 10 to 20 hours a week while preparing for the SAT. Even though currently no one has the initiative to change the way normal tests are given in high schools, the steps are already put into place to change the SAT. The first step was having colleges go against that requirement. There's a lot of different ways one could go about finding solutions to the issues the SAT poses. A simple one could be adding more time for anyone who takes it, eliminating the stress and anxiety that comes with the timed test, or perhaps having fewer questions on both the math and English section of the test. Something along the lines of those suggestions has already happened. The optional essay section on the SAT, along with the SAT subject tests, have been removed indefinitely. This is a big step towards lessening the demands put upon children during this pandemic. The permanence of this removal shows hope for the future action to take place and further change to the SAT for the better. This issue is more relevant now than it has ever been in the past because of our current circumstance of the pandemic. A coronavirus identified in 2019 has caused a pandemic of respiratory illness called COVID-19. The coronavirus outbreak began in December 2019 and had continued to grow as a threat up to our present day. This pandemic has had so many effects on so many different parts of everyone's day-to-day life, and the way students were tested academically was just one aspect that had changed among the multitude of problems that sprouted. Due to COVID, many of the tests were canceled and many colleges have dropped the requirement for an SAT score to be submitted. Since so many colleges have dropped the need for a score that quickly, it begins to make people wonder if the scores really were important or if they weren't. All Ivy League schools have waived the standardized testing requirements for 2020 through 2021 applicants. Besides the Ivy League schools, there are around over 1,240 colleges that have also decided not to require a student's SAT score to be submitted along with their applications. There have also been a handful of those colleges, about 500 of them, that have chosen to lengthen the amount of time for the SAT not to be a requirement so that future students in years to come won't need to submit a score to apply. Things have been this way for so long, you might say. Why would it ever need to be changed? Since the 1920s, the SAT has been used each year as a benchmark for students' education and learning abilities. Relying on the SAT as a gatekeeper of most students' college admissions has worked perfectly fine for this long amount of time, over 100 years. Would there even be a point in stopping that now? Well, the SAT may not reflect the student aptitude. Sure, it may reflect the true ability to be a test taker. It might also provide an accurate portrayal of knowledge, but not for all students. The SAT doesn't provide the same data that a GPA can provide. A student's GPA shows the ability to be a good student. It provides colleges with a more accurate read on how well a student performs in their classes, and it shows college admissions a general understanding of what to expect from them as a college student. At less selective four-year public colleges, a student with a high GPA and a middling SAT score has a 62% chance of graduating within 6 years, while a student with the opposite credentials, a high SAT score but mediocre grades, has only a 51% chance of graduation. Ideally, in a perfect world, there just wouldn't be such high stakes for the kids taking the exam. The score each student receives wouldn't hold that much weight over how well they'll be able to do further on in life. Every person would be able to clearly see that the trend that many colleges are taking throughout the United States and would agree that the SAT should not be a requirement, at least for now. The test would be postponed in a perfect world until everything with the global pandemic is figured out and life is able to go back to semi-normal, where each student feels safe going to the testing center to take the SAT. The SAT wouldn't be weighed as heavily on the college applications as the GPA or past involvements with the school and other outside clubs and teams. Of course, grades are important, but there are so many flaws with the SAT itself that it's not a valuable judge of academic skills. The world is truly changing now, and hopefully for the better. Maybe other unforeseen factors could play a role in the subject matter, but currently, I feel the right thing to do for all colleges would to be continuously to go test optional. The colleges should not hold it against those who choose to submit a score and who don't choose to submit a score. We should revisit our reliance on the SAT as the gatekeeper for students' post-secondary opportunities. It can either continue to be a hindrance on the ability to go further with education, or with the option of not needing to submit a score, it could help the student decide their own fate and weigh their options on whether or not it would help or hurt them.